Laziness doesn't show up as a sudden collapse. It arrives quietly. It creeps in unnoticed, whispering soft excuses into your mind, telling you to take a break, to wait a little longer, to start tomorrow. And while it seems harmless in the moment, it's laying the foundation for a future filled with regret. Laziness isn't loud. It doesn't roar like failure or crash like tragedy. It whispers, it delays, convinces you that a little time off won't hurt. But each of those moments, each time you surrender to it, compounds. It becomes your pattern, your default response to challenge. And before you even realize it, it's taken root in your identity. You stop chasing. You stop growing. And worst of all, you start settling. It begins in your habits. You wake up late once or twice, skip a workout, push a goal to next week, and soon it's not a slip, it's a lifestyle. That initial voice that suggested rest becomes the dominant voice in your head. You begin to rationalize why you're not doing the work. You tell yourself it's self-care, that you deserve to take it easy. But what you're really doing is justifying your stagnation. Every great dream that's ever died was killed not by a lack of talent, but by a lack of effort. Laziness strangles discipline. It turns urgency into comfort, and urgency is the fuel of success. Without it, even the most ambitious vision remains unrealized. What makes laziness so dangerous is that it doesn't feel threatening. You don't feel its damage immediately. Unlike pain or failure, it doesn't shock you into action. It sedates you into stillness. It fools you into thinking you're okay, that you're doing just fine, while it quietly steals your edge, your hunger, your fire. And the worst part, you only notice the cost when it's too late, when opportunities have passed you by, when doors have closed, when people have moved on, when you look in the mirror and barely recognize the version of yourself that once burned with purpose. By then, laziness has already robbed you of years. It's important to understand, laziness is not rest. Rest is intentional recovery. Rest is earned after exertion. Laziness is avoidance dressed up as rest. It's sitting still when you haven't moved. It's choosing ease over effort without having earned it. It's hiding from the discomfort of growth under the mask of self-preservation. True rest refuels. Laziness drains. Rest builds you back stronger. Laziness makes you weaker. Don't confuse the two. Don't let laziness wear the mask of self-care when what you really need is self-discipline. The people who rise, who accomplish, who live fulfilled lives, they aren't born with more drive. They just refuse to let laziness take control. They recognize the trap early and fight back. They treat their time like gold because they understand that laziness is a thief that never stops trying to break in. They hold themselves accountable even when no one's watching. They know that every moment matters and that laziness doesn't need a reason. It just needs a little opening. And once it finds one, it spreads like wildfire. It's not enough to want success. You have to hate what threatens it. And laziness is the greatest threat of them all. So ask yourself this: what has laziness already taken from you? What have you delayed, abandoned, or let slip away because you kept putting it off? What skills could you have built? What goals could you have reached if you hadn't given in so often? The truth is, laziness doesn't just steal your time. It steals your identity. It turns you into a watered-down version of who you were meant to be. If you let it, it will take everything. That's why you must see it for what it is. Not rest, not a harmless break, but a quiet killer of potential. And the longer you ignore it, the more damage it does. Emotion is fleeting. It's unpredictable. It changes with the weather, with sleep, with stress, with mood. One day, you feel like taking on the world, and the next, you don't even feel like getting out of bed. That's why emotion cannot be trusted to carry your mission. If you rely on how you feel to determine what you do, you'll live a life of inconsistency. One step forward, two steps back. There will be days when you're tired, uninspired, or just mentally drained. And if you wait for a surge of motivation to move, you'll remain stuck in place. That's where most people lose, not because they don't have potential, not because they're not capable, but because they wait to feel right instead of doing what's right. They wait for the perfect internal state instead of developing the internal discipline that says, I move no matter how I feel. Discipline is the muscle that overpowers emotion. It's not about being robotic. It's about being reliable. It's about waking up and doing what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like doing it. That's the line that separates the average from the elite. Discipline doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't ask, do you feel okay today? It simply acts. It shows up. It executes. That's the mindset you must train yourself into. Because if your goals are worth fighting for, they must be worth fighting for on the days when you're uninspired. Discipline is how you build trust with yourself. Every time you follow through, even when it's hard, you reinforce your identity as someone who gets things done. That consistency compounds. It makes you resilient, focused, and dangerous. It strips away the limits emotion places on you and replaces them with the power of habit. Think about how many dreams have died because someone was too tired to show up. How many plans faded because someone didn't feel like it that day. That's the curse of relying on emotion. It makes you fragile. It builds your actions on unstable ground. And when the storm of life hits, and it always will, emotion collapses. But discipline is the foundation that stands through the storm. It's the reason people keep climbing even when the world says quit. It's the force that says, I don't care how I feel. I care about what must be done. And when you live from that mindset, you start to move differently. You stop negotiating with you. You stop giving yourself a way out. You stop making comfort your compass. Discipline strips away the softness of excuses and replaces them with the steel of responsibility. It doesn't argue with your feelings. It overrides them and says, I don't need to be motivated. I need to be consistent. And that shift changes everything because the world doesn't reward the emotional. It rewards the relentless. It rewards the people who show up early, stay late, push when they're tired, and keep climbing when it hurts. You don't need to be in the mood to move. You need to move so you can stay in control. Emotion wants comfort. Discipline wants growth. And only one of them is loyal to your long-term greatness. It's not that feelings don't matter. It's that feelings can't be the driver. You must acknowledge them, but never let them dictate your steps. The moment you let your mood determine your movement, you've given up control. You've handed your life to chance. And that's a dangerous place to live. One bad day becomes one bad week. One bad week becomes a new normal. And suddenly you're a stranger to the habits that once fueled you. That's why discipline is your lifeline. It holds the line when everything else falls apart. It protects your purpose from your own inconsistency. And in a world full of distractions, weakness, and emotional traps, that kind of discipline isn't just rare. It's powerful. People often say they're waiting for the right feeling to start. The truth is, the feeling comes after the action. Confidence comes after the reps. Momentum comes after the movement. You don't get motivation by waiting. You create it by doing. The first step is always the hardest. But once you take it, the second becomes easier. The third becomes natural. That's the beauty of discipline. It doesn't just get things done. It rewires your identity. Every time you act in spite of emotion, you become stronger than the excuses that once owned you. Every time you choose discipline over delay, you prove to yourself that you're not controlled by temporary feelings. You're controlled by long-term vision. The most successful people in the world aren't always the most talented or the most intelligent. They're the most consistent, the most self-governed, the most unshakable when their mood says quit. They've built a system within themselves that doesn't require motivation. They've trained their minds to follow through without the emotional roller coaster. That kind of internal power only comes from discipline, and it's not something you're born with. It's something you decide on. You build it through repetition, through grit, through showing up again and again and again until the habit becomes your identity, until it no longer matters how you feel because you've already decided who you are. Comfort is seductive. It feels safe. It feels warm. It tells you you're doing fine. You've earned this, stay here. And that's the exact reason it's dangerous. Comfort convinces you that there's no need to push harder, that there's no reason to evolve because life is good enough. But good enough is the death of greatness. It's where dreams go to sleep and ambition starts to rot. You weren't built to settle. You weren't designed to play it safe. That craving you have for more, for impact, for change, for success, it doesn't come from comfort. It comes from challenge. And the deeper you bury yourself in comfort, the further you drift from your true potential. When people say they want to be great, what they don't always realize is that greatness has a cost. That cost is comfort. You can't have both. You can't rise while staying rooted in ease because the process of transformation, real transformation, hurts. It demands discomfort. It requires you to do things that feel unnatural, unfamiliar, and sometimes downright painful. Waking up early, grinding in silence, training when you're tired, learning when you're confused. These moments don't feel good, but they build something priceless inside of you. Growth doesn't happen in the soft places. It happens in the struggle. And if you keep choosing what's easy, you'll keep living a life that's small. Comfort shrinks your vision. It dulls your drive. It replaces passion with passivity. The more comfortable you get, the less urgency you feel. The goals you used to obsess over start to fade. The hunger you once had turns into casual interest. You stop pushing, you start drifting, and before long, you don't even recognize yourself, not because something terrible happened, but because nothing happened. Comfort is a slow death. It doesn't destroy you in an instant. It wears you down until your dreams don't even feel real anymore. You go through the motions. You survive instead of thrive. And deep down, you know you're capable of more. But comfort has convinced you to stay exactly where you are. The most dangerous thing about comfort is that it doesn't scream. It whispers. It doesn't knock you down. It rocks you to sleep. It tells you, relax, you're doing better than most, or you've already come so far, just take it easy. But listen to that voice long enough, and you'll look up one day realizing you haven't moved in years. Greatness doesn't live in that zone. It's found where discomfort lives, where the pressure is high, where the path is steep, and where nothing is guaranteed. That's where you discover your grit. That's where you sharpen your skills. That's where you learn how far you can actually go when you stop protecting your comfort and start protecting your purpose. You will never become who you're meant to be if you're constantly avoiding discomfort. The version of you that you admire, the one who's stronger, wiser, more disciplined, more respected, that version doesn't live inside the comfortable version of your life. That version is built in the fire. It's built when you do what most won't, when you sacrifice what's easy for what's necessary, when you choose growth over gratification. And yes, it will be lonely. It will be exhausting. But that's the tax for greatness. That's the price for living a life that's remembered. Because comfort makes you forgettable, but discomfort, that makes you unforgettable. Comfort teaches you to survive. Discomfort teaches you to lead. And if you're serious about living a life that matters, about becoming someone that others look to, respect, and remember, you're going to have to make a choice. Will you chase the short-term peace of comfort or the long-term power of discomfort? You can't have both. Comfort will tell you to slow down, take a break, play it safe. But greatness demands you rise. It demands you risk. It demands you leave behind the familiar and step into the unknown again and again until your strength no longer comes from feeling safe, but from knowing that nothing, not fear, not fatigue, not failure, can stop you. ChatGPT said, motion is power, momentum is fuel, but it all begins with action, no matter how small, no matter how uncertain. The greatest misconception people carry is that they need to wait for clarity or confidence before they begin. That's a trap. That hesitation, that overthinking, that constant preparation becomes a cycle of inactivity. You don't need to see the whole staircase to take the first step. What you need is movement. Because when you move, you break the grip of fear. When you act, you silence doubt. Momentum doesn't magically appear. It's built through deliberate, consistent action. Even when you're unsure, even when you're scared, even when the outcome is unclear, that first action, that single decision to begin is what separates those who dream from those who do. People often wait for motivation to hit them like lightning before they take the first step. But motivation doesn't create action. Action creates motivation. Action builds belief. It shifts your energy. When you do something, anything, you create progress. And that progress, even if it's small, starts to create motion. And that motion builds your confidence, sharpens your focus, and makes the next step feel easier. Success isn't about massive leaps. It's about stacking small wins. One push-up leads to 10. One email leads to a full day of productivity. One uncomfortable decision leads to a new standard. The point is start. Don't wait to feel ready. Just move. Movement rewires your mind to expect momentum instead of hesitation. When you sit still, your problems grow. Your doubts echo louder. The longer you wait, the heavier everything feels. But when you act, you disrupt that stagnation. You inject life into your system. It might not be perfect and it might not feel right, but it moves the needle forward. Perfection is not the goal. Progress is. Too many people waste years waiting for the perfect plan, the perfect timing, or the perfect version of themselves to emerge. But none of that matters if you're not in motion. It's in the doing that we find direction. You'll never figure everything out standing still. Action gives you feedback. It teaches you what works, what doesn't, and what needs to change. But you can't learn by thinking. You learn by doing. Momentum makes the hard things easier. It transforms resistance into rhythm. Once you build it, it becomes your greatest weapon. The things that once felt impossible begin to feel natural, not because they've changed, but but because you've changed. You've become stronger, more focused, more driven. And the reason you got there wasn't because of some miracle or breakthrough. It was because you kept moving, even when it was ugly, even when it was slow. You kept showing up, and that consistency becomes identity. You're no longer someone who starts and stops. You become someone who finishes, someone who endures, someone who grows through the grind, because you've seen firsthand what steady momentum can build. When you're in motion, life responds differently. Opportunities come to people who are already moving, not because they're lucky, but because they're visible. They're active, they're creating, and in that creation, they're attracting. You don't get noticed when you're sitting on the sidelines. You get noticed when you're in the arena, doing the work, pushing through setbacks, and refusing to quit. Momentum is the signal to the world and to yourself that you're serious, that you're committed, that you're not waiting for perfect, you're building better, and that shift is what leads to breakthroughs. And yes, momentum fades if you don't protect it. That's why action has to be daily. You can't hit it once and expect it to carry you for weeks. You must feed it. You must keep taking steps, even small ones, every single day. Because when you stop moving, inertia takes over. And inertia is a slow death. That's why the key isn't intensity, it's consistency. You don't need to sprint every day. You just need to move, even when it's minimal, even when it's messy. The goal is movement, not magic, because once you're in motion, everything begins to shift from your thoughts to your habits, from your energy to your results. And that's when momentum becomes your greatest advantage. ChatGPT said, laziness is not a one-time battle. It's a daily war. It doesn't knock on your door once and walk away if ignored. It comes back again and again, disguised in different forms. Sometimes it's physical tiredness. Other times it's distraction, comfort, or the belief that you've earned a break. That's the deception of laziness. It's not always obvious. It doesn't always shout. Do nothing. Sometimes it whispers just this once, or you've done enough today. And if you aren't aware, if you aren't mentally armed, you'll fall into its trap without even realizing it. You'll begin to make excuses that feel justified. You'll start to lower your standards piece by piece until mediocrity becomes normal. That's why laziness must be hunted and defeated every day. Not just once, not just when it's convenient, but relentlessly, because it never stops trying to steal your momentum. You cannot allow your mind to negotiate with laziness. The moment you open the door to later, you invite weakness to take the wheel. That voice in your head will always try to convince you that you can delay, that you can do it tomorrow, that it won't matter. But tomorrow is just a lie the lazy mind uses to escape responsibility. The truth is, every moment you delay, you're casting a vote for the life you say you don't want, and that vote compounds. It builds into your habits, your identity, and eventually your future. Every single time you feel lazy, you're at a crossroads. One road leads to self-respect, the other leads to regret. The decision is never neutral. It's either sharpening you or softening you. And the only way to win that battle is to stop allowing your feelings to dictate your action. Fighting laziness daily means having systems in place. When motivation fails you, and motivation will fail you, it's unreliable, it's emotional, it comes and goes. But your routine, your structure, your discipline, those are weapons you can rely on. Set your schedule, follow your rituals, and don't give yourself the option to choose how you feel about it. Get up at the same time. Put your phone away. Train your body. Feed your mind and guard your time like a warrior. When you make discipline non-negotiable, laziness loses its grip. You don't beat laziness with one grand decision. You beat it by stacking small victories throughout the day. By doing what needs to be done, whether it's glamorous or not, especially when it's not. Laziness will always offer a way out. It will always give you an easier path. It will always offer short-term relief in exchange for long-term pain. And too many people take that deal. They chase comfort in the moment and trade away their goals, their strength, and their potential. But the problem with shortcuts is that they leave you empty. You don't build pride by doing the bare minimum. You build it by going through the hard days, by showing up when no one's watching, by keeping promises to yourself, even when no one else would care if you did it. That's how confidence is forged, by refusing to give in to laziness, even when it's the easier choice. One of the most dangerous lies laziness tells you is that you can catch up later, that you'll grind tomorrow, that it's okay to slow down today, but that later rarely comes. The truth is, momentum is fragile. Once broken, it takes tremendous energy to rebuild. That's why the small decisions matter. That's why the lazy moments must be stopped before they grow into lazy days, then lazy weeks. The longer you stay in that place, the harder it becomes to escape. That's why you must stay sharp. You must stay focused. You must stay in motion, even if it's just one small action, because motion builds power, and power keeps laziness at bay. Every day you wake up, understand this: laziness will try to win. It will tempt you to snooze your alarm, to delay your priorities, to scroll instead of create, to settle instead of strive. And every day you must choose to fight it, not with emotion, not with inspiration, but with action. Immediate, disciplined, focused action. You kill laziness by starving it of attention. You kill it by refusing to feed it even for a second, because the moment you entertain it, it grows. And once it grows, it becomes harder to kill. So don't wait for the perfect mood. Don't wait for motivation. Wake up and move. Train your mind to conquer the weak voice inside before it even speaks. That's the only way. That's the cost of greatness. That's the daily war, and it must be won every time.